Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. We can see that the price target increase for AMD continues to come in, and this is based on the OpenAI deal that was announced let's say last week. And in my opinion, this is not surprising because at the end of the day, this is a door opener for the rest of the market, the rest of the, let's say, cloud service providers, anyone that is interested in let's say generative AI. And that market we know is quite sizable. I mean, if you're new to investing in AI stocks and semiconductors, it might be a little bit difficult to understand. Are we in the middle of the cycle? Are we at the top? Are we at the bottom? Like, where are we and where are we going to go? One way to obviously judge that is to look at the estimated sales for the up and coming few years ahead, total available market size based on some of these research companies. I mean, this one is kind of saying like almost $1 trillion US, 6 or 8 years from now in 2034. That's interesting. I mean, I've seen some different numbers, but in my honest view, if you, for example, look at the latest news over the past couple of days, right? One big news when it comes to generative AI that is tangible is obviously OpenAI's new video app based on the Sora 2, I believe they call it. And it's quite interesting. It's really high quality videos. It's quite fun for creators. And obviously you don't need to sit in Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop and all this kind of softwares that you had to learn 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You can now just essentially prompt it, and these are just getting better. This is essentially the second version of Sora, but I would say, like, imagine where these models are going to go a couple of years from now, right? So, and I really think that generative video is the future. Like, imagine if this goes to a place where even Hollywood movies and even other creators like on YouTube, likes of myself, can create some like short videos just to explain something. That would be really interesting. And I would say, I simply think that we are not at the top of the AI, let's say, bubble, if you want to call it. I mean, there's a lot of discussions about the .com bubble, comparing data, but I would say it's a little bit premature as things stand right now, but you never know. I mean, who am I to say? I'm essentially the same person as you guys, judging from the outside. But in my view, I wouldn't say that we are at the top, at least. Now, looking, for example, more at AMD details, we can see that, as I mentioned, Morgan Stanley also have a good point here, that they revised their projections for 2027 sales now to around a revenue of 50 billion, 51 billion, up from previous target of 44 billion. And that would also mean that earnings per share would go up from 6.74, according to Morgan Stanley, to 8.82. Now, before we look at AMD's revenue segment as we go forwards from, let's say, Q3 this year and onwards a couple of years, and also, how much of that is from the data center, what segment is from the CPU data centers, and what segment from AI GPUs, as you can see on this chart, and also looking at the earnings per share development, especially comparing my own numbers here compared to, let's say, the likes of Morgan Stanley, which updated their projections for 2027 based on the OpenAI announcement last week. I would say we need to also look at some of the other like indicators. Why should we look at other indicators? For example, one of them being like the interest in AMD software stack ROCm. I believe we are now at the 7th versions and the 8th will be released very soon. And they are really quickly developing and trying to catch up with Nvidia's CUDA. You can see that CUDA interest on Google search and Google Trends has been quite stagnated over the past 3 or 4 years, although it's still well above AMD's ROCm interest. But you can see that they also follow the same kind of big trends. For example, this peak here like in the summer of this year and the drop off since then. But still, if you look at it, I would say interest in ROCm is really starting to kind of go up slowly, although it doesn't look like a whole lot here, but it really is kind of getting there. And do not forget that this is, I mean, based on recent data, right? This is without essentially the OpenAI deal announcement, right? So imagine what that's going to do a year from now, a couple of years from now, because I see OpenAI as a door opener to the likes of, Google, Microsoft, Tesla, XAI, Grok, everything that is interested in AI market. They have a self-interest to not buy everything from Nvidia. They have some kind of interest from their point of view to not make Nvidia the main kingmaker, in order to not essentially give everything away to Nvidia and pay them really expensive money for these GPUs. You need to have somewhat of a competition in the market, and I believe we are finally getting there. Now, going into AMD specifics, right? Let's look at my own, for example, earnings per share. Before we look at this graph, let's go to the actual Excel sheet, and you can see here that for 2026 I'm currently, without updating, based on the yeah, based on the recent OpenAI deal that was announced, I still have them at just shy of 8 or so US dollar earnings per share on a non-GAAP basis. And let's say that the GAAP and non-GAAP difference will be quite, small for AMD going forward, especially, a year from now. Historically, it's been quite huge difference for example, GAAP earnings and non-GAAP based on like stock-based compensation and some other bits and pieces. But as we go forward, this difference, between these two, line 38, let me zoom in a little bit, line 38 and let's say line 42 is starting to like decrease, as the amortization of the Xilinx and, the stock-based compensation goes down, that difference is starting to become less relevant. And non-GAAP basis, I would say, my own model suggests like just shy of 8 or so US dollar without the updated, news about OpenAI, which would make me to think that for 2026, most likely in my models, as I update this, will be above 8 US dollar. And that is essentially a full year ahead of what Morgan Stanley revised their own numbers for 2027. So imagine if they're still conservative and based on the 2027 earnings per share of 8.82 US dollar, they're advising a price target of 246. Essentially in halfway through next year, as we get into like April or May, would I be surprised if they realize this and they increase their price target from 246 to like 380, 400? Not at all. That is essentially what I'm seeing kind of continue to happen. Let's not forget that by this time next year, would I be surprised that Sora 3 is out there, right? Even better, much better. These videos are quite like, let's say, not the best I've seen. There are some videos out there that are truly like insane, like truly mind-boggling of the amount of like, let's say, content and the level of content creation that is available by this, Sora 2. So next year at this time, just imagine the sheer amount of even competitors out there offering this Sora 2 or Sora 3 to, competitors to the consumers, and the amount of inferencing that, imagine like what you can do and how many people out there are going to try to make their own videos. Just imagine how much hardware you will need in order to satisfy that customer and consumer demand out there. So I would say we are definitely moving in the right path, and bar any significant, complete market collapse and let's say that the bubble burst, I don't think so. I have to hold my hands up. In early 2023 and 2024, I was trying to believe that maybe it was just our AI bubble, but seeing the results of this and the work that some of the companies like Nvidia, OpenAI and XAI has done, I genuinely believe this is just the beginning. You can use these large language models in professional work. Like if you don't know how to program a simple program for essentially optimizing your workload, maybe statistical analysis, if you're an engineer at any company, you can, without any background in programming, go in Grok or ChatGPT and with a couple of iterations get a really functional statistical analysis model just without a single lines coded from you. So there's so much just to be tapped into when it comes to AI market, in my opinion. And it's really nice to see that AMD is in a position to actually enjoy some of this. Now, going for, let's say, 2027, look at the jump of earnings per share that I modeled from 2025, this year to next year, from 4.3 or so US dollar to 7.8. I would say by 2027, when MI500 is out there, and if this market continues to go, by the bare minimum, AMD will have 10 or 11 or so earnings per share based on the simple fact that they're going to increase their AI competitiveness. So here you can see my roadmap for AMD, different products, like starting with 2023 Q4, which was the MI300, the first generation, at the time the fastest ramping AMD product of all time. Then we recently in Q2 earnings report, Lisa Su, the CEO of AMD, said that MI355X, so the successor, or like let's say essentially the successor to MI300, there's a MI325X in between there, but yeah, that's essentially the same chip with the same logic. It's just like a bit more memory, but MI355X is the real successor to MI300X. And Lisa mentioned that that one is even ramping up way faster than MI300 ever did, like on a multiple times faster. And I would say with interest of OpenAI in MI400X next year in second half, let's say from like, Q3 and Q4, would I be surprised if MI400 ramps up much faster? For sure, I wouldn't be. Like I've started very conservatively, like with 600 million on the first quarter, which is the second quarter of next year. Maybe I would say like probably most likely the third quarter. But quickly you will see that MI400 will go into the multiple billions every single quarter. And then MI500 will probably start to get close to like, double digit billions, like maybe 9, 8 million, close to like 10 billion every single quarter by end of 2028 at this kind of rate, I would say. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing AMD getting huge amounts of revenue only from the data center. And remember, when I talk about data center, AMD is not Nvidia. They're also selling a lot of other like general purpose traditional CPU servers. If you scroll down here, you can see that I divided the segments here. When it comes to the data center, you can see on line 135, EPIC, which is the CPU data centers AMD currently selling. They're doing quite great. I mean, they're averaging right now around 2 or so billion every single quarter. In short time, there will be around 10 billion or so annual sales only from the like EPIC CPU sales, and they have like insane amount of margins on those. Remember that the EPIC CPUs that are like 200 cores, 256 core on the 6th generation, you can see that those are still like high margins because of what? Because the chiplets that they are using are much smaller than the ones that goes into the like MI300. So the silicon area that they are selling on the CPU side is much less than they are selling on the, let's say, GPU side for AI. So there is also one of the reasons why also the EPIC CPUs, despite the average sales price still be maybe, I don't know, like between 5 to 10,000 US dollar, they simply have such a high margins on those as well. So AMD is not going to disappear anytime soon. I believe like even if the AI market starts to slow down, they have so much other business to rely on. I mean, I always mention that AMD is not Nvidia. They are much more diversified. So in a case where I'm completely wrong and the AI market completely collapses in a couple of years time or even next year, AMD still would be, in my opinion, at least 150 US dollar company in pure like the rest of the business. So I'm not so surprised when it comes to this company skyrocketing, and I think it's just about time that the, let's say, analysts are starting to realize this, and the price target in short time, like give it a couple of quarters, would be well above 300 in my opinion from the analyst. And the actual stock price, I mean, this is just speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised that it would be north of 300. So in any case, Jeff, that was just a quick update on AMD stock. I think like at the end of the day, it's really important to follow some of the trends, like the interest in the AMD software stack compared to Nvidia. Look at the analyst price target, why they increase and why they decrease. Look at the general market, like is there new capability being added to the consumers, i.e. me and you and others close to you, which is obviously the generative video. That's a whole new like segment in addition to generative, image creation, right? So there's a lot happening in this market, and this is, in my opinion, just the beginning. Yeah, so that was all for today. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for your time, and see you in the next one.